Well, you already know what time it is. It is time for another amazing episode of the Her Voice Shines podcast. I am your fabulous host, Shanae Washington, based in the beautiful city of Houston, Texas. And as always, I bring you the best guests, and we don't take a lot of time to hear the story because that's what we're here for. So, without further ado, we're going to jump right into our next fabulous guest. She's going to tell us her name, where she's streaming from, and jump right into that story. And here she is.
Hi, I am Dr. Amara Pope, and I am streaming from Canada, close to Toronto, but not quite, and close to Elmira, Ontario, where I was born and where I was raised. I was born in Scarborough, Ontario, which is the kind of the Toronto region, surrounded by many different immigrants. My parents are second generation Trinidadian Canadians. So that was a great experience for me to be born and raised in a space that was surrounded by people who looked like me, spoke like my parents, cooked like my parents. But then they moved me to small town Elmira, Ontario. Elmira, Ontario, we were the brown family in the corner house. I was the only quote unquote colored or dark skinned person in my class, in my school, in my church, in my community. So that actually resonated with me later on when I went to do my bachelor's degree. It was a joint honors bachelor's degree in English and Fine Arts with a digital media specialization. That is where I began to explore the representation of identity in literature, in art, and in the digital media space. Then I went on to do my master's of communications studies. And in my master's degree, I explored how artists like Drake and Nicki Minaj represented diversity in their music videos and their music lyrics. Then jumped to my PhD in media studies, where I then explored how three Canadian artists, Justin Bieber, Drake, and Jessie Reyes, all represented diversity in what I called Canadian R&B music in the contemporary space. I looked at how white Canadian Justin Bieber from small town Ontario, second generation Canadian Colombian woman Jessie Reyes, and biracial artist Drake all represented unique identities in different styles and different approaches to R&B music. I looked at the history of Canadian R&B because I found that it was long underrepresented in the contemporary space. I looked at how contemporary artists build on the backs of many artists before them, including Maestro Fresh West, Michie Mee, Julie Black, Deborah Cox, and then even before them, bands like Crack of Dawn. Or even before that, we had artists who were performing in different forms of quote unquote Black music, Canadians and US artists, and how they collaborated to create this mixture of hip hop, R&B, and pop music and what we call contemporary R&B music today. So that was kind of my initial exploration identity and in music and in media. Then simultaneously, while completing my PhD and my MA and my BA in the academic world, I was working full-time in marketing and branding and communications. So I applied that theoretical knowledge into industry, and I looked at how different forms of communication developed in different industries. My work in my professional life and the non-academic career side of me developed throughout multiple industries. I worked in marketing, branding, and communications in industries ranging from technology, investment management, and finance to tech and construction. So it's been just a broad range. And I found that was really useful for me to really understand how representation is affected in different spaces. Now I am actually a fine artist, so I am working and doing commissioned work for different spaces locally and internationally, creating artwork, which was a passion of mine even before I began my academic and my industry career. So that's really great to be revisiting my former passions. I'm working full-time as a marketing communications manager for Track Unit, which is a global telematics company in the intersection of construction and tech. I'm also a board member of Kafka, which is the Contemporary Art Forum in my local region. And simultaneously, I'm guest lecturing for universities and colleges, whether that be local or international. So I wear a lot of different hats, but I have a lot of passions, and I'm happy to contribute both my education and my industry experience to those spaces.
Oh, wow. Look, beautiful career. Beautiful career thus far. And to see you being a young woman of color, Dr. Amara, for me, it's very refreshing and inspiring because the reality of it is that as young as you are, and it has you kind of remind me slightly of me, like a little bit, because I feel like I live like so many lives.
Mhm.
So like, it's like one of those things like, okay, you're doing what now? Because every year was like this change for me. I never got to stay in one role or job title more than 18 months. So you just
Mhm.
start to kind of do all these things, right? So first, let me bridge here because we did talk about the communication and then your discovery with the artist. But talk to me, how did you pick up the artwork piece? I think I may have missed that because now you're doing that. So how did you actually pick that back up to make that the thing?
It's so crazy because as a little kid, I loved to draw. I loved to create art, and that was something I just did as a kid. And being somebody also that felt different in my community, it was a place of solstice. I got to be alone with my sketchbook, listening to music, creating work. Most of it didn't get past a sketchbook up until my later years. So in my undergrad, one of my majors was fine art. So I got to develop that skill more professionally. But after my undergrad, I then continued on to academia and marketing. So I didn't go back to art up until last year, actually. When I submitted my PhD dissertation, there's a brief period. Well, it didn't feel brief, but it was a period of time submitting that paper, and then you wait for your defense. And in that scheduling moment, I was working full time, but the stress was really getting to me. And I found that I wanted to rediscover just what I knew calmed me down best, and that was painting. So it became a form of meditation for me during that period of time where I was finishing up my PhD and hoping to graduate. And I also simultaneously was getting married. So there was a lot of craziness happening all at one point. And I found that painting was the best and most strategic way for me to kind of meditate and relax, enjoy music, and just enjoy my presence. So it started then last year, and I just haven't stopped. It has become just a great form of relaxation. I continue to do it today.
See, that's what I like to hear because I knew that in there, I'll probably find like a piece layer to it. Because
Yeah.
if it's something, that you went back to pick up, I mean, it must be something that matters, right? You've gone back and you're sitting in space. So I'm hoping lots of growth in that space because if that's where you still feel that passion and it can bring some income, I'm always like, I'm always like two thumbs up. I love it. Let me shift here quickly because we have to talk about this. Like I left financial services in 2021 and kind of transitioned into space. And for at least the last 7 years or so of my career, I typically was the only one in these spaces. So me having to navigate those spaces and then navigate it from a different lens of leadership, I did have challenges. And part of that was the lead to my transition out because I kind of those challenges versus the rewards, that balance just was not there, Dr. Moore. I just have to be frank with you. I'm always transparent. I want to talk to you about your journey through even the marketing and the communication space, being Dr. Moore, a woman of color from a small town, because some of those things and just who you are, right, is going to follow you wherever you go. And sometimes you just have to be prepared for that. So I want you to talk about your career from that perspective.
Definitely. Well, actually, last year I was participating in a diversity in tech discussion panel that Track Unit, the company I work for, put on. And that was really a great opportunity for me to discuss some of the challenges I've faced in the corporate world, whether that's in boardrooms and in meetings or just everyday communications. And as a young woman of colored skin, I definitely felt different in a lot of these different meetings because I was the only one who looked like me. Sometimes I was the youngest in the room. Sometimes I was the only woman in the room. So my intersectional identity as a young female of color definitely made me feel like an outsider at times. And in moments, I felt like I had to prove myself. And that is where I kind of developed this imposter syndrome that I didn't know I had early in my career. And that applied to the academic career as well. And so what I found is I tended to over-explain myself or had moments where I had to feel like everything was in a row. All my ducks were aligned. Everything was perfect for me to be able to speak on something. And that often led me to not speak up when I felt like I should. So being thrown into the deep end in investment, actually, I was an account manager at an investment marketing firm. And I was the only female on that whole board and the only person of color on that whole board. And having been in a position like that as my very first full-time position on my own, I was actually living away from family too. So I didn't have as much support as I would have liked, but I got thrown into the deep end. And that made me at a very young age just kind of pull up my bootstraps and prove myself, because I felt like if I hadn't, a lot of opportunities wouldn't have come to me. So that's given me a sense of confidence, and I've continued to build on it. It's not that it's come easy, but throwing myself in those unique positions has enabled me to build a sense of self that I don't think I would have had otherwise. So although it became somewhat of a hardship, it also became a superpower for me as well.
Yeah, I love it because it's so important that we take those reins back ourselves and start that work. Because imposter syndrome specifically for me, it started to try to creep back up when I went into this new thing. It's like, you've been doing financial services for all this time. Like, what the heck are you going to do out here in the new world, as I called it, this new world, to prove yourself as credible, and really start to gravitate to the things that you like, because people have only known you as kind of this career woman. And now you're pivoting to building your own thing, products and services, even now like a podcast. Like, what are you going to do to keep shoring yourself up that you are worthy for this space and that you will continue doing this authentically? So it is a daily walk. So I always have to hear that from different perspective angles and even age groups, because it's something that women are battling, and it's very serious that they take control of that. It really will change their life. I know that I still consider you very young in your career, and you can do anything. I mean, like I said, you can really do anything. I mean, because over the past 3 years from me leaving corporate, I've touched so many different things. It's crazy. It opened up so many things. I want to ask you this. Talk to me about mentors. Do you currently have a mentor? What are you doing to continuously fuel your professional development? Because you are still very young in this thing, and there may be things you want to share. Talk to me about that level of professional development and how you're ensuring that you're kind of staying fresh, if you will, or even just motivated for the ride.
Well, I always talk about, in terms of personal role models, I've been very fortunate to have a loving mother. And she became a homemaker when my younger brother and I were born. And I heard about the struggles she had even prior to that. Hustling. She's a first generation immigrant in Canada, and she took on any job she could to help pay the bills, and then kind of shelved her career to raise my brother and I. And that's something that inspires me so much, not only because I saw the hustle in her, but she always tells me, anything you do, take it as far as you can. And I think she took motherhood so far in the best way. She's given me so much love and support. And that drove me to want to have financial stability, to have a career, to have a kind of position where I can say I've done the best I can and you can't tell me otherwise. So that's kind of the fuel and the fire behind me. And I've been lucky that my father has done the same thing. So I would also say that part of my role models in my life as I grow up is not only been women, but also men. I've been very fortunate to have great male bosses that uplift me, or at least demonstrate where I want to be in how many years from now. And I think that that's really important, because when you ask a lot of young women who their role models are, I don't think it necessarily has to be a genderedized thing. I think it could be males that inspire you to get to where you want to be, but obviously keeping in mind that sometimes it is still tougher out there as a woman.
Oh, for sure. And I think that balance for me is good, because I always tell people my ultimate role model, if you can strip everything away, is always going to be my grandfather, for resilience, period. Like, if anything else, if he left me with nothing, it's going to be resilience. I know how to make a little bit go a long way, and I know how to continuously show up in this world as me. And I don't think there's nothing else any mentor could have given me more than that. So because I can raise my hand and say that, I tell people that is the role model. I am very proud to say it. And even at the age of 80 or near 80, he still continues to fight in his journey, right? So that's very impactful for me. And I try to always be grateful there, right? And say it with my mouth all the time, to give roses. So many things. I was like checking Dr. Amara out. Dr. Amara has already done a TED Talk. I'm just honored to be in the space to see someone taking the strides. I want you to tell me about your journey with, it doesn't have to be particularly TED, but just giving speeches. There's so many women that have stories, Dr. Amara, and so many different people that need to be proud in positioning these things so that we can hear them. I just want to take you to take us on that journey more towards the speaking path, and also to tell us some of the things that you're passionate about speaking about.
Definitely. Well, I'll start with the TEDx talk and state that when I look back now, you may not see it, but knowing that that was me and kind of the thoughts going through my mind, I cringe, and not at the fact that I think I'm a better public speaker, because that was when I was in my young 20s, but I also saw the way that I felt like I had to prove myself to be on that stage. I saw myself speaking a lot about my accolades because I wanted to prove why I was worthy of listening to. That's something I've overcome over the years, but I think it goes back to that idea of imposter syndrome and being felt like I was very different in a boardroom, too young, maybe too much of a woman to be in a lot of spaces. And I felt like I had to prove myself. So I conditioned myself to explain why I was worthy of listening to. And like I said, a boardroom, it could be an academic space or on the stage of a TEDx stage. So I overcame that. And I think that's really important when you do any kind of public speaking. It's great to tell a narrative and stick to the message of what you want to say. Don't try to prove that you're worth listening to. Don't try to feel like you need to explain why you're taking up space or time. If you have a really valuable message, it's worth delivering. And if you feel like it's not valuable, sometimes you need to remind yourself that there could be just one person in that audience that could resonate with what you're saying, and it's worthy of delivering that message to that one person.
Yeah, very, very, very good. And for me, I'm always telling myself that, especially when I have these interviews in this space, it's been a fast lunch. That the work that I do is very important, because even in these spaces, when I tell, how we do this flow, and I tell people this is a transparent conversation, like you can meet Sinead on the sidewalk out here, and we're going to have the same type of conversation. And when I tell women to step on this stage in this space, that if I am telling you to come here and do this thing, I have number one deemed you're worthy. But guess what? That's not enough. You yourself have to deem that worthiness and step into this place and tell that story boldly, as if it wasn't even dependent on me, right? It's because you take that energy wherever you go. So definitely, because that proving, it gets played out, Dr. Amara, that it constantly having to prove, sometimes even it's shrinking, that way of life is becoming played out. So if nothing else, I want people to take from this space that you have someone who's done a TEDx talk, who's, I think has overcome odds, if you will, standing here and telling us that she's taken that piece of that away and is continuously moving forward with speaking. So thank you for that. Let's do a little bit of reflection. Dr. Amara, because I want you to go back to the girl that moves to the small town. The girl that, this does not feel good because I don't have a peer that looks like me. Like, what does this even mean? At such a young age, I mean, that kind of can make or break people, right, on how they view the world, how they show up. I want you to go back to her, because she probably couldn't see you now. She didn't know. She didn't know that Dr. Amara was going to do all this stuff and become a TEDx talk speaker and have all of these different things. So what would you tell her? Like, what would you give her as a piece of advice? Because you probably didn't have no one to truly, truly give it to you from the journey that you've taken.
Wow. I almost want to get emotional thinking about that reflection. I haven't been put in little Amara's shoes in a really long time, but I would tell her to just keep pushing forward without knowing what's in front of you, because you never know what's going to come, what's going to move you forward, what's going to be an opportunity that can propel you. So I would say any little Amara or a little girl out there who doesn't see in front of them what they could become, just take every opportunity you can and turn it into something beautiful. Because if you seize every opportunity, you'll have no regrets, and you never know what that might turn into.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. You have to do that often, Dr. Amara, because that reflection shows you that growth, shows you that continuous path. Because sometimes we're just doing the thing. We have so much, we're just doing the thing. And if we're not careful, we can look back 10 years and you're like, oh man, like I did all of that, or I overcame those feelings. So I have to constantly go back and, talk to old Sinead, who would never be doing a podcast, by the way. She
you can put on the shoulder a little bit too.
even Dr. Amara, the 2019 Sinead would not be doing the podcast. That's how much growth. That's how much growth.
That's amazing, though. It's
That's
amazing.
how much growth that has happened over these years, because this doesn't seem like it should be a part of my life.
But it is. But
Dr.
it is.
Moore, what's next? Like what's next? What do you want? You know, these are like canned questions. They always ask you this like in interviews, like what's next in the next 5 years? You know, they have those but on this side, I want you to be reflective. It doesn't have to be even representative of a career goal. Just what do you want next? And that can be now, as in next week, or 5 years.
I am thoroughly enjoying embracing the art world again. And I would love for this to continue to grow over the next few years. I have a few commissions coming out and art gallery exhibitions that are happening. And that's one thing I just hope will continue to snowball over the next few years, because having had lived so many lives, as you had said, over the last 3 decades of my life, I have so much fuel and passion behind my artwork. And I would love for that to just be more of a career development opportunity for me.
Yeah, and this piece, Dr. Moore, will change. It's changing for me probably like annually. Define happiness for me. Define what happiness is to you, because that will continue to change on your journey. I guarantee you. Like, you'll look back 5 years ago, it's like, that doesn't even matter anymore to me. It's happening. It's happening in real life. So define happiness for me. And then, if you can, what are you doing to kind of fuel that internal happiness or peace?
Happiness for me right now would be balance and stability. So by that, I would mean I would have enough financial stability to be able to have a wonderful work-life balance. And people say, you know, work is what's paying the bills and fuels the spare time that you have with your friends and family. But I would love for there to be more of a shift where work is there, and it doesn't feel like work. And family and friends are a larger part of that equation of what makes up my everyday life.
Yeah, that's good. I'm finding that, I know they say it's kind of like cliche, but like there's these simple things that like a career or whatever it is, accolades or whatever it is, just can never fulfill for me. There's always going to be this place of family, this place of peace, this place of community that's going to bring me that ultimate happiness. So as I kind of acquire all the things, I'm remembering to go back to that place where I know nothing monetary, nothing material could be there. So it's good that you have a good balance there.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Tell me about fears.
Ooh.
What they ask us in corporate a lot, like, what keeps you up at night? You know, they always kind of ask that. And I have to go here too, because if I'm not careful about being honest with what I'm fearful about, I can tend to backslide. So sometimes I have to say it out of my mouth. What's a place of maybe, it doesn't even have to be fear, maybe uncertainty, maybe something that I haven't really just quite put my finger on how I'm going to figure it out, just in that space. What is that for you?
I would say I'll pivot back to the idea of fear. And I think that I don't really have any mistakes, because every misstep has turned into something else that had later effects. It's that butterfly effect where you went one way and then it turned into another thing and another thing. And then that's how I got to where I am today. But in terms of fear, I would never want to be in a position that I live in regret. And so I think that looking back is a sense of regret if you feel like you could have done something differently. Whereas I don't have that. My fear is more looking forward and saying, okay, am I doing the right thing at the right time in this specific moment? And I think that has kind of influenced the way that I've developed my academic and my industry professional career, because I've kind of just taken anything that's come at me. And now that I've had a moment to slow down a bit and realize, okay, what is it that I really want to do with my future? I have a sense of fear that I'm going down maybe different paths that I might have to run back to at the end of the day. So in terms of fear with the fine arts, that's something that I had for a really long time, not revisiting it for a very long time, not only because I was crazy busy with work and school, but also because I didn't really know if I could have a solid career and foundation out of it. It's something that I love to do and I'm passionate doing, and I think I will do nevertheless. But turning that into a profitable career was something that I was always afraid to do. Creating artwork for somebody else, commission-based, for example, is a very scary thing because you don't know if the outcome is going to be as great as what you might have in your mind or in your body. So I think that that's where the fear lays right now for me, is in my fine arts career. But also with that kind of mentality I've had for a long time, just jumping in and seeing what the ripple effects are in the long run.
That's beautiful, because if you think too long before jumping in, you actually may not jump. And statistics, not only me saying it, but statistics actually prove that overthinking and staying on the ledge for so long. Yeah. Dr. Moore, tell our listeners where they can find you, how they can connect with you. There's so many young girls that could benefit from your journey. They really can. Just being who you are, in terms of your demographic, and then also to that tenacity piece that says, keep going, Dr. Amara, even if you're scared, keep going. It's so many young women in this society that can benefit from that piece of it. But tell them where they can find you.
Well, you can visit my website at www.dramarapope.com or .ca. That's www.dramarapope.com or .ca. And you can follow me on pretty much any social media platform, on Instagram, X, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. It's all the same at Dr. Amara Pope. So it's at DRAMARAPOPE.
I absolutely love it. Now, this is the segment in the show, Dr. Amara, where you get to give your final thoughts. If people were to stumble on this and they don't get anything else out of this interview or any other essence of Dr. Amara, essentially, what would you say in this moment?
Don't apologize and don't feel the need to prove yourself. Take up space, elevate your voice, and I promise you that somebody at the end of the day is going to find your message valuable.
Absolutely beautiful. Well, guys, I told you I don't skimp on my guests. I truly look into their information when they send it in, because I'm that intentional and I know that these stories matter. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to a great episode of Her Voice Shines. Dr. Amara has been dope. Give her, you should be giving her a round of applause. But you guys know I love you. There's nothing you can do about that. And remember to let your voice shine. Thank you for another fabulous episode, and we are out.